President.
I recognize the senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I'm here today to ask the Senate to pass a bill that helps kids with cancer. Michaela Nealon Give Kids a Chance Act. Now, very seldom do I actually read remarks. I typically like to just simply speak about it, but I think this is so important that I'm actually going to read the remarks that are in front of me, because I think it's important for people to know what we're doing, why we're doing, and who she was, the advocate, and to understand why we're here today. So Michaela, who the bill is named after, was a 16-year-old girl from Colorado. And as a father of 6, this is kind of personal to me, so this is why it's so passionate enough to me too, because my son currently, while he doesn't have, cancer like this, we've been going to Rochester for over a year, and we're doing some experimented stuff with him too. And we got an opportunity, because it's not a death sentence. What he has isn't a death sentence, but we've had to go through this and continue to go through this. And so it's even more personal to me now. But in July of 2020, Michaela was diagnosed with a rare pediatric cancer, and she spent nearly 6 years traveling across the country for treatments, while also coming to Capitol Hill to advocate for children with cancer. So but unfortunately, she tragically passed away October 29th of this year, advocating literally almost every day of her life. Michaela was a fighter. She fought so other children could have an opportunity that one day the devastating diagnosis that she received would someday be curable for other kids. Some things that come across your desk in Congress just make sense, and this is one of them. This bill has 33 co-sponsors in the Senate, and they're bipartisan, from liberal Democrats to conservative Republicans. We worked hard to get this bill passed for over a year, and it passed the House by voice. Not one single person objected to this. Why? Because why wouldn't you want to allow kids, our kids, an opportunity to simply have the same opportunity as adults do with cancer? It's called pediatric cancer. Give kids a chance. Why wouldn't we want to do that? It's hard to explain why we wouldn't want to do that. But yet I understand that my senator from Vermont intends to object to the Senate in doing this. And I think it's wrong. I think it's dead wrong. To think that someone is willing to hold hostage a child who's fighting for their life, that simply wants to have an opportunity to try an experimental drug that may extend their life 1 week, 1 day, or may even cure it. And you're willing to take that away from the family because you have other priorities, because you want to hold it hostage so you can try to do something with community health care centers? I support community health care centers. I want them. They're important to rural Oklahoma. But there's a time and place for everything, and to hold this bill hostage because of it is not right. You're stealing a family an opportunity to spend maybe an extra minute or an extra day or maybe a lifetime with a loved one. I don't know how you argue against it. I don't know how you can possibly stand up here with a straight face and say that it's okay and it's just politics. This isn't just politics. We're playing with people's lives. This isn't politics. This is more than just politics. But I will tell you, if this is objected to, and we can't find a path forward here today, I can promise you I will not stop fighting on this. It won't happen. We're going to rinse and repeat and continue to go down this path until we give the families with these rare diseases an opportunity to live, because that's what this is about. I recognize my friend from New Hampshire that may have some comments about this too.
Well, thank you, Senator Mullin, for yielding, and I support the motion to send this bipartisan package that you are speaking about to the President. Obviously, the provisions that Senator Mullin, my friend from Oklahoma, is discussing are incredibly important. There are other provisions in this bill, too, that have bipartisan support. This bill would cut costs for prescription drugs through a bipartisan provision that I worked on with Senator Paul to speed up getting generic drugs to market. Now, I understand Senator Sanders' perspective about wanting to attach to this package increased funding for our country's community health centers. They are incredibly important, life-saving resources to millions of Americans. So as we're talking about saving lives here, we have to recognize the role that community health centers play in that. They provide vital services in our communities, and I fully support passing this funding increase for them through the House and the Senate as soon as possible. But as I understand it, the House will not act to do so at this time. So, as disappointed as I am that the House isn't ready to support increased funding for community health centers, I also believe that it is important to take action on this package now to help address pediatric cancer and lower prescription drug costs. So I am disappointed that this bill will not move forward today. Having said that, I hope we can come together and find a way to continue to work with my colleagues on a bipartisan basis to get this package over the finish line next month. So thank you for yielding, and I yield back.
I'd like to yield to the chairman from Louisiana, Senator Cassidy.
I rise to support Senator Mullin's legislation, the Michaela and Island Give Kids a Chance Act. You know, Mr. President, I'm a doctor, and people would come desperate because of their illness, and they would just want one more chance for themselves, their child, whomever. The folks who were most desperate were the parents for their child, and we all know that, because if someone dies when they're 70, it can be tragic, but they've lived 70 good years. And when someone dies when she's 6, she is denied 76 more years. And it is the desperation of these families that kind of cries out from this piece of legislation. They want this passed. And the goal of this legislation is to get cures for pediatric cancer to the patient more quickly. Now, we've been working on this for several years, Democrats and Republicans, trying to make it so that those families, their desperate pleas, are actually heard. And just as the senator from Oklahoma noted, the legislation was recently renamed to the honor the legacy of Michaela Nayland, who spent her final days advocating for better pediatric drug research. The irony here is that the objection is going to come out of a genuine concern that people achieve health care, a concern I share for increased funding, for funding to be extended for community health centers. I share that concern. But there's no one way to treat the ills, literally the ills of the United States of America. And to think that we can do it all at once, it's just not true. But also, to say that you're not going to give a chance for children to have a cure for cancer if you don't get what you want is just not true. It is selfish. It is tragic. These parents are desperate for this act. Now, this will expand the research and drug development for these pediatric illnesses. And I commit, as chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, that I will work to pass community health center legislation. I will work to have it well funded. I will not let it sit on the back corner, never getting done. There is a commitment from the chairman to work with my Democratic colleague to get it passed this coming year. If that is the only barrier between offering these children hope, I ask that that not be a barrier. And with that, I yield.
Thank you, Senator from Louisiana. And I, too, want to say, I support community health centers. As I said, they're very important in rural communities, very important in my hometown of Westville. In fact, it's the only health care that's available. I don't want them to be harmed. I want them to be well-funded. But that's a separate conversation we can have. The chairman just said he'll work to get it passed next year. Now, there's no reason to hold our kids hostages anymore. So, as if in legislation session and notwithstanding Rule 22, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 1262, which will receive from the House further that the bill will be considered and read third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
I recognize the senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, let me be very clear. In the midst of a broken and dysfunctional healthcare system, we must do everything that we can to find new cures and treatments for pediatric cancer, and I strongly support that effort, period. I think we can all imagine the kind of heartbreak that parents go through when they learn that their babies or their young children have been diagnosed with cancer. And I should say that as the former chair of the Health Committee, I was actively involved in the bipartisan agreement that we reached over a year ago, which included the Give Kids a Chance Act. Bipartisan support, ready to go. Sadly, that enormously important legislation was torpedoed, as some of you will recall, by a series of tweets by Elon Musk. And Republicans became frightened, and they gave up on that bipartisan legislation. As the current ranking member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, I believe that we must revive that bipartisan agreement that was worked on month after month after month by Democrats and Republicans. Therefore, in a minute, I will be making a unanimous consent request to include this bipartisan health care package, again, an agreement that was supported by the leadership in the House and the Senate as an amendment to the Give Kids a Chance Act, and I hope very much that my Republican colleague will support that amendment and we can go forward together. And let me very briefly describe what my amendment would do, which I hope my Republican friends will support. And I say this at a time, as all people know, not only that our healthcare system is broken, our primary healthcare system is especially broken. Tens of millions of Americans today cannot get to a doctor when they need to. And there are estimates, you talk about people dying, there are estimates that tens of thousands of people die in the United States of America because they are sick and they can't afford to get to a doctor when they should. And that is why community health centers are so very important and provide health care today, dental care, low-cost prescription drugs, mental health counseling to over 30 million Americans. And all we are doing here is asking my Republican colleagues to support the bipartisan agreement we had last year, which would increase funding for community health centers by $340 million. Mr. President, in fact, according to the Commonwealth Fund, health centers today are facing a disastrous situation. In fact, they face losses of nearly $42 billion in revenue over the next 5 years. So community health centers are a lifeblood. They are the way the low-income, working-class people in rural America, urban America, get the health care they need, and we are seeing them under enormous financial strain. Just this past year, we had a health center site in Vermont, and I understand 2 in New Hampshire, that were forced to shut down because lack of funding. What do you think happens when people can't get to a doctor? You know what happens when they're sick? They die. This is happening all over America. We all know that primary care is critical for children, in fact, in detecting cancer early, saving lives. How do you think children with cancer, how do we learn about it? They go to a doctor. If they don't go to a doctor, we don't find out about it. Researchers at the Emory University School of Medicine and the University of Chicago found that having access to primary care in childhood has been shown to lower the rate of death in blood cancer by over 10%. It is vital that we begin to increase funding for community health centers. If Republicans agree with it, if Democrats agree with it, let us do it. Let us do it right now. Further, this amendment would extend mandatory funding for the National Health Service Corps for 2026. Guess what? In the richest country in the history of the world, we don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. We don't have enough dentists. And what the National Health Service Corps does is forgive medical debt to those professionals who practice in underserved areas where they are desperately needed. Let's do it. Further, this amendment would extend mandatory funding for the Teaching Health Center program through September 29, 2029, at an annualized rate that reaches $300 million. Teaching health centers are extraordinarily important because they allow medical school graduates to do their residencies in community health centers, not just in large urban hospitals. Finally, this amendment would provide $200 million a year for the special diabetes programs, which is so very important. Again, Mr. President, this is not a radical amendment. I'm not coming here saying, let's do something we've not talked about. I'm not talking about passing Medicare for all here. I am talking about doing what the Republicans and Democrats agreed to a year ago, but was torpedoed by some tweets from Elon Musk. Therefore, Mr. President, I ask that the request be modified, that my amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection to the modification?
I reserve the right to object.
I recognize the senator from Oklahoma.
You know, Mr. President, everything that the senator from Vermont just wrote about was why I think he supported affordable health care, a.k.a. Obamacare. I thought it was supposed to fix all this stuff that he's wrote about, and we figured out it hasn't. It's wrecked the system. It's unaffordable for the American people. Yet it was the Democrats that sold us, or sold the American people on it. Not us, not the Republicans, sold the American people on it. It's been disastrous. And so now he wants to hold kids that are dying of rare diseases and pediatric cancer. Want to hold them hostage to now try to push his agenda farther and not go through the committee of jurisdiction, but hold the kids hostage. The kids. Everything the senator from Vermont just talked about was political. I'm talking about lives. I'm talking about giving kids a chance to live an extra day or a lifetime. That's what I'm talking about. This isn't nothing to do with politics. Nothing. Nothing I'm talking about has to do with politics. This has to do with kids. Yet my senator from Vermont wants to make it about politics. You know, this time of the year at Christmas, we talk about Grinches all the time, right? They go in and they steal the kids' gifts. But at the end of the show, their hearts grow bigger and they give the gifts back. And they allow kids to be excited about Christmas morning. What's happened right here in front of us, the Grinch is stealing kids' lives, and they're stealing hope from the families. Hopes from the families that might have an opportunity just to try for a political agenda. And I hope to God that every single family that's going through this will hold the senator from Vermont accountable, and the state of Vermont will hold him accountable too, because he's playing with kids' lives. He's literally killing kids in front of us because of his political movement. And it is ridiculous, and therefore I object.
The objection is heard, but remind senators that in a course of debate, not to disparage other senators' motives or character.
Well, let's speak the truth. Well, don't interrupt me.
There's objection to the modification.
I think I have
Is
the
there
floor.
objection? Is there objection to the original request?
Yes.
Objection is heard.
All right, Senator from Oklahoma says that I'm talking about politics. Well, if talking about politics means that millions of children have the right to see a doctor, I guess I am talking about politics. If talking about politics means that kids can get dental care when their teeth are rotting in their mouth or get mental health counseling, I guess I'm talking about politics. So once again, this important piece of legislation I support, but I also support passing the bipartisan piece of legislation that was worked on last year. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.